In today's video, we're going to take your Docker and container skills even further. I'm joined by Mike in the Cloud, or MW Cloud, as we focus on Docker containers and how they integrate into Microsoft Azure. So if you're ready to learn, let's go. Today's video is sponsored by Sysaid, who have just launched its new AI Agent Builder, and it comes complete with pre-built, ready-to-use AI agents. It's transforming the way IT teams work. For more details, check out the link below or visit them today at sysaid.com. Now, an obvious question that comes to mind is with VMs. I'm just thinking, like in Microsoft Azure, you run VMs, and to keep costs down, you need to turn off the VM, or even, on your own desktop, you might have machines switched off. Because it's using less resources, would you still need to switch these off, or are these just permanently on?
There's some interesting ways of doing that depending on which type of applications you're going to want to run. To answer your question in a little more detail, let's look at a couple of different ways that you could actually deploy stuff into Azure. So there's three kind of major ways of doing this. The first one is container instances. Okay, this one up here. Now, container instances is the Azure equivalent of me doing what I just did. Okay, grab a container, go and run the thing. I don't really care about much else. I just want to go and run that container. So I'm going to create a container down here. Okay, I'm going to make a new resource group. I'm just going to create a temp container resource group there, and we'll call this Mike and the demo. So we'll deploy this into UK South, that's fine. SKU is going to be standard. Now here's the thing, image source, right? It's just like everything else in Azure, there's thousands of pages of documentation for this. The rabbit hole never ends. Alice never hits the bottom. We've got quick start images, container registries, or other registry. If I select other registry, this here is going to be linking to Docker Hub, okay? But they have put a rate limit in now for Docker Hub because there are too many people pulling. So this demo has a 50-50 shot of working, okay? Because what this is going to do is it's going to get container instances to talk directly to hub.docker.com. And I'm going to pull down WordPress. And I could literally be on hub.docker.com and I can go and grab anything I want. So say, for example, I wanted a Minecraft server, I could go and grab one of these Minecraft servers that somebody has actually deployed on here. I could go pop the names of that in. I don't need to put the full URL in. I just need to put in something like hashiecraft/Minecraft. Cool. But I'm just going to put WordPress in here. It could be Linux, 1 core, 1.5 gigs worth of RAM. That's fine. We'll give it a Mike and the demo DNS prefix down here. And leave port 80 running. That's cool. We don't want any monitoring for the moment because it's just a demo, and we're just going to go and deploy that straight away. Now, the difference with deploying these, it's very, very simple, as you see. Give me a container, go get me that from Docker Hub and just deploy the thing onto Azure. No worries, right? It's the uniqueness. Over here, we're doing uniqueness based on higher level ports. So if I have different versions, I can just give a different high level port locally. That's not going to work on the internet, all right? So what container instances is actually going to do to provide uniqueness to this container so I can connect to it is it's just going to weld a public IP address to it. That's all. Now in the real world, you end up putting this behind certain services as well if you want to. But we'll leave that to deploy. Take a couple of minutes. While that's deploying, I'm just going to tell you about another step up from here, because container instances are really just for one container, all right? You've got something called Azure Container Apps. There we go, Container Apps. Found it eventually. Now this takes things one step further. What this allows you to do is wrap a few different things around the containers that you're doing for expansion and monitoring and load balancing. So what you can do with an Azure Container App, I'm not going to build one of these out because they take a lot longer to actually deploy, but I'm just going to draw it out for you. Now I do again have a video on that, which is another sort of half an hour long video just on Azure Container Apps. So the container instances that we were doing is the very, very simple one. All we're doing there is we're just running a single container. It's going to run WordPress. We're going to slap a public IP address to it, and we're just going to come in and we're going to connect to that thing. No worries. All right. Microsoft are handling everything for us. On the other side of this equation, I said there was 3. The third one, the complicated one, is Kubernetes. All right, this thing, also K8S. This is your big infrastructure. Kubernetes, what that allows us to do is actually create virtual machines, because yes, Kubernetes runs on virtual machines, and we can deploy our containers into these virtual machines. Now, the Kubernetes virtual machines are known as nodes, and Kubernetes can expand these virtual machines to give us more capacity. But what it does is it handles all of the networking, it handles the scalability, it handles the deployment, and we actually have a different command taught to this called kubectl. What Kubernetes does for you with containers is, if you go back to the idea of virtual machines, and you think about Hyper-V and VMware, you're not going to have one physical computer running a couple of virtual machines in an enterprise. You're going to have lots. And if you've got lots and lots of enterprise servers running hundreds and hundreds of virtual machines, you're going to need some software to manage that. So Andy, what software would you use to manage hundreds of virtual machines and many different physical servers that are running those virtual machines that are running Hyper-V?
Oh gosh, Hyper-V Manager, typically, but there's probably better software than that, but typically that, or something in Azure anyway.
There is some options in Azure, yeah, with things like Azure Arc now, but the classic sort of option was things like System Center Virtual Machine Manager. Absolutely. Do you remember that? So System Center Virtual Machine Manager managed all of your hardware, all of the networking, and the movement of virtual machines and the creation of virtual machines in these large infrastructures. So in VMware, that's things like vSphere. You can imagine Kubernetes like these. Those are called virtual machine orchestrators. Kubernetes is the equivalent of an orchestrator. Now, massively, massively complicated. Also, you can imagine Kubernetes like this. Let's have a look for cars. I know. So if you go look for a Caterham 7, okay? One of these cars. This is Kubernetes. All right? Go build it yourself. In fact, more to the point, this is Kubernetes at the core of it. Okay? If you go to the Kubernetes website, download and try to install it, there is just a Kubernetes engine. That's literally everything else gets bolted on. There's no GUIs. There's no load balancing system built in there. There's no monitoring system built in there. You have to bodge all that on yourself. So when you see Kubernetes on Azure, right, or AKS, all the fun stuff around it, all the scalability, all the graphical interface to it that Microsoft provide, that's all the extra bits and bobs. If you go and look at Kubernetes on Google Cloud, on AWS, theirs is slightly different as well. If you attempted to run Kubernetes on your own and you wanted to do something like a Pi cluster, like that, which one day I will get around to doing as a little project, you can run Kubernetes on that. So yeah, there's a lot to it, but a lot of flexibility. Some people want that. There's a lot of overhead. For some people, this is not enough. And this is too much. Okay? So what we need Baby Bear's bed, which is just right, because if one's a bit too hot and one's a bit too cold, we need the one in the middle, which is the Azure Container Apps. Okay. Now what Azure Container Apps does is it obfuscates a lot of these things. It gives you the simplicity of being able to take a container or a container image, deploy it to an Azure Container App, and what Microsoft will do is they'll take that container image. They will also have systems inside here so you can monitor it. So you can monitor it for like CPU load or network load. And if you exceed a certain amount, you can then start to deploy multiple of them, as in scale them out. It can also take those systems and provide load balancing for them as well, and provide obviously public IP addresses in front of that. You can also layer on top of this things like web application firewalls in front of this, layer on things like Azure Front Door for caching, do all sorts of fun stuff. Now, I now need to rewind 10 minutes to your original question, Andy, which was in regards to cost and do you need these things running? I said it was a little more of a complicated answer because this all has been an answer to that one single question, because it brings me to something that Azure Container Apps can do that's really quite cool, which is called scale to 0. All right. With these monitoring systems, what it means is that since it's looking at active CPU load and active network load, we can throw more containers on the fire when we need them, and we can just keep scaling. Because it's Azure, you're not going to run out of resources. But as those loads drop off, if somebody is not using your application at all, it can literally turn them all off. It can keep the load balancing and the front end actually working. And you saw how fast those containers were to actually initialize. So it means that if somebody comes in for the first time, a container can be spun up on demand. Sure, it might take a couple of seconds for the site to load at that point. It might not be absolutely instant. The next person is going to be instant, but you're going to save a lot of money if you're building scalable applications through to a scale to zero system. It is possible to do that with Kubernetes as well, but you're going to have to build and construct all that stuff yourself around there as well. There's a lot more complexity on there, but there's a lot more flexibility on there as well.
Cool. Very good.
But let's come back to looking at this container instance, which will have deployed by now. So let's see what a container looks like on Azure. So we're going to come out of container apps. We're going to go to my resource groups. We're going to go to that resource group that I just created. If I look in the resource group of temp container, here's my container instance. Remember, all I did was I said, go grab WordPress and run it for me. So that's all it's done. There's my FQDN. It's mikeandydemo.b0.uksouth.azurecontainers.net. And if I go to that website right now, or containers.io, what I should find is WordPress.
Perfect.
Same container that I run locally is being run in the cloud. And if I go into containers, just like my local system here where I connect to the container, if I go to connect, I go to bin bash here, I'm inside that container. And you can see all the WordPress stuff that's running inside that container. Any questions so far?
Yeah, very cool. I was going to say one thing, obviously running it in Azure, one thing you would definitely need to think about is security. I mean, is that, you said HTTP, what's the security like on this as compared to, let's say, a virtual machine?
There are a number of different things you have to think about from a security perspective on here. HTTP and HTTPS is the least of your worries. Because what you can do with those kind of services in the larger sense of things, if you are running many different containers inside Azure, you would be putting these behind things like web application firewalls, okay? And those are going out directly to the internet. So first of all your traffic is going to get monitored by these web application firewalls. You don't necessarily have to worry about putting your HTTPS inside the container itself, because that's all going to get layered on at the front end there, all right? That could also be layered in with things like Azure Front Door for global caching services as well. Now, one of the things you do have to worry about is over here inside virtual machine land, right? You're installing the operating system, you're installing the application, you're doing all of that. Over here, inside container land, I'm just pulling something down from the internet. Now, you have to be wary of the things you're downloading and running, okay? These are full Linux boxes, technically. And yes, they can be compromised if they have flaws within the software that's running on there. So if you look at hub.docker.com, there is a lot of security in here already. They do have official images. So the WordPress one I was grabbing there, this is a Docker official image. This means the Docker themselves have published this and they've checked, balanced, and make sure everything's all hunky-dory. It's all been scanned appropriately. But if you go and look here for these are some random ones that I published on here. You don't know me. You don't know what I put inside these containers. You can download these and run them. Sure, they're in an isolated environment. And sure, they can't go out and talk to the rest of your system. So if there is something sketchy inside there, well, you don't know. But if you're trying to run a container with an application that you're then going to put information into, yeah, you got to be careful with this sort of stuff. You've got to scan it. You've got to make sure that the code is correct. Just like running anything that you find on GitHub, you got to go check it. Now, Microsoft do have services to do that for you as well. If you look inside Microsoft Defender for Cloud, and this is not the only one, there are tons and tons of other security things out there you can do. You can come in here and have a look at, not regulatory compliance, if I go into environment settings, I haven't got this stuff turned on, but notice I have the ability now to scan Docker Hub. which is nice. So if people are using, or my developers are using publicly available images, we can maybe restrict those as well. We've also got, where's my setup gone down here? Workload protections. Found the right thing. There, container image scanning. So if you are the normal sort of public flow through, or the normal sort of flow for a company, would not to be grabbing stuff directly from Docker Hub and running it, okay? It would be to take things from Docker Hub, put it into my own container registry that I have control over, okay? Like my own shared folder full of images, right? There I can kind of start to run scans on them. Have a look what's inside those images, have Defender for Cloud break them apart, look for vulnerabilities within there, look if they've been infected with anything, look if they contain any dodgy code, that sort of stuff. Also, you've got the ability for Defender for Cloud to actually directly monitor containers. So you can see I've got 0 out of 1. If I upgraded this through a bit more money at Microsoft, then what this would do is it would actually scan live running containers as well. On container instances, on ACA, and on Kubernetes as well. Okay, so yes, there's many different security things to worry about in the same way that you worry about security on your virtual machines, but you have to worry a lot more with Docker because a lot of the time you're grabbing public images and your developers are grabbing these public images as well. Let me show you one more thing you can do with Docker. All right, something that's quite cool. So we just looked at deploying applications, but let's have a look at other flexibility for Docker, okay? Let's go and look at actually creating a dev space, right? So let's say, for example, I want to write some Python code, and I don't have Python installed on my computer, right? So how do I do this? Maybe I want to write some Python code with some very specific extensions, and maybe I want to give that to somebody else at some point. Well, we can get into creating containers at another point, but I want a development environment to work with. So if I come up here and I have a look for Python, all right, Python. I've got a Docker official image here for Python. I've got very different versions of Python that I can download. But what I want is I just want Python 3. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do something interesting here, okay? I'm going to run a specific command. So there is something a little bit interesting with containers that's very confusing when you first see it, and that's containers that run and containers that just die. Okay, now what I mean by containers that just die, I mean containers that just, well, they run. Whoops, I'm looking at the images there, sorry, let's delete the container. So this container, Grafana, is running because it's running a web server in the background. Now, have you ever run a batch script or a VBS script in the day? You run a batch script, it pops up on your computer, it runs through, and then the terminal closes because the script is done. Well, that happens a lot with containers as well. If I come up here and do something like docker run Python, do it really, really simply here, Python latest, okay, this is going to download a container that's running Linux inside there and has got Python installed. So let's give this a second to go and download and run, but we're going to watch at the same time my container thing over here on Docker Desktop once that gets going. This is one of those concepts that the first time you see it, if you're exploring it yourself, you could end up losing hair very quickly. Docker can be a very frustrating experience if you've got nobody teaching it to you. Did you see that? Very quickly, did you see that little dot there? See, it says exited. That's because it had no reason to live. And if it has no reason to live, it turns itself off. Essentially, it's run a script, and if I go and start this again, it'll start and then immediately stop. I've got to make a little bit of a change to that command, okay, to get this running. What I need to do is I need to run this. So I need to do docker run, okay, and I need to run -it, which is interactive. So we're going to run this Docker container, and I'm going to be able to interact with it and work with it in a moment. But what I also need to do is it's saying here, docker rm Python latest. So it's going to grab that, but it's already grabbed it, so it doesn't need to grab it again. And this is going to run this with an extra command, bin bash. So this is to keep a terminal up and running. So if I run that now, notice it doesn't die. And I've actually got it here, interactive. So I can now connect this. I'm inside this container. If I exit this, okay, fine, it turns itself off. Okay, I want to do a little bit more of a modification on that one. Okay, so now I've run a docker d, Again, I'm running the Python latest. The name of it's called Python container. Tails is just logs, okay, in Linux. So all it's saying is send all the logs to dev null. It's put it into an infinite loop. But I want to go and connect to it in a special way, right? So what I want to do is I'm going to launch our fun friend over here, VS Code. Yay, we like VS Code. VS Code's excellent. So inside VS Code, what there's an extension out here called dev containers. They changed the name. It was called dev spaces at one point. This thing here. If you install dev containers into VS Code, what we can do is we can do some funky stuff. I'm just going to open a very quick directory here. We're just going to open up my working directory and I'm going to do my Docker demo folder. So in this Docker demo folder, it's just a folder that's open. It's got no files in at all. So I'm going to Control-Shift-P to bring up the command palette. And if I go to dev containers, what I can do is I can attach to a running container. This is cool. All right. Now, interestingly, this container could actually be sitting in the cloud. Attach to a running container. But I'm going to attach to my Python container, which is the only container that I've got running at the moment. Attach to a running container, attach to the Python container. It's going to throw up a new window. And inside this, it says connecting to dev container opening remote. Now this could be sitting on a completely different computer. I could do this over SSH as well. But now I'm inside that Python container inside VS Code. So if I go open folder on here, there's the root. This is the root of that Python container, which means I can start making stuff. So let's make a working dir inside the container. Whoops, dire. And let's go and make a new file there called fizzbuzz.py. Okay, and because I'm going to be lazy, I am going to get Copilot to write this for me. Write me fizzbuzz in Python. Now fizzbuzz is a basic programming test. All it does is say count from 1 to 100 or within whatever range you've got. If the number is divisible by 3, print fizz. If the number is divisible by 5, print buzz. If the number is divisible by 3 and 5, i.e. 15, 15 modulus there, print fizzbuzz. Okay, that's cool. That's still what I need. So I can keep that. And I can go and run a new terminal here. And I'm developing within Python inside the container. The container's isolated. It's never touched my system. If I want to have containers running on Python 2, Python 3, if I want another container that's running a different language, these are all different development spaces that are completely isolated from each other. So now if I just go ls on here, cd working dir, and then run python./fizzbuzz.py, there we go, there's fizzbuzz running. Cool. Dev spaces. Really, really useful if you want to test certain things. So if you want to run Python, you don't have Python installed on a computer, but you do have Docker, you're not impacting the machine. What it does mean is if I built custom containers, say for example I was working on a complex application, and that application needed various different things. It needed a specific Python Flask server, it needed some back-end stuff, it needed all sorts of weird and wonderful stuff. And you, Andy, you were going to develop this application with me. We need to both be working in that same development environment. Instead of you having to install exactly the same software that I have, I can create a container, put all the software inside it, publish that to a container registry, and you can just do Docker run Mike's development environment on your system. And you're on a Mac, I'm on Windows, it doesn't matter. And you can connect to that here with VS Code Dev Spaces.
I learned something today. Wonderful.
You learn something every day with me.
There we go.
So what we actually kind of went through there was we had a look at the comparison between virtual machines and Docker containers, and how Docker containers are application level virtualization and virtual machines are hardware level virtualization. We checked out hub.docker.com and we pulled down our WordPress container locally, and we connected to that locally. We had a couple of copies of it running as well, which is nice. We then actually went over to Azure Land, and in Azure Land we used container instances. And these container instances, we went and took the same WordPress container and pulled that in from the internet, or pulled that in from hub.docker.com and ran it. We also talked about Azure Container Apps and how they do something funky called scale to 0 over here. And we talked about how Kubernetes is really big, really cool, really flexible. I mean, heck, Kubernetes was developed by Google to run Google. Okay, this thing gets big. But it also comes with vast amounts of complexity attached to it as well. But it also runs in Azure under the name of Azure Kubernetes Services, or AKS. Just to point out there, Andy, the videos that I mentioned on my YouTube channel here. Here we go. How to deploy Azure Container Registries using Docker, Nginx, and container instances on there as well. I also go through here Azure Container Apps if you want to go and check that one out.
Very good. So definitely check out Mike's channel. We want to get him some more subscribers because he really does deserve it. He puts a lot of work into his videos, as you see. So Mike in the Cloud, MW Cloud on YouTube. Thanks so much, Mike. I really appreciate you dropping by, and a fantastic session. Thank you very much. So there you have it, Docker running in Azure and Kubernetes, and now you know all those terms. I really hope that you've enjoyed this session, and I got to say, hats off to Mike in the Cloud. Dude, you were absolutely awesome. I learned so much from that session, and I hope you guys did as well. Hey, listen, if you've got any questions or comments, get them down below. We always love that feedback. And of course, if you've not subscribed to both channels, myself and Mike's, then bump the subscribe buttons, ring the bell, and come and join our learning communities. Okay, that's it for this time. Thanks to Mike again, and also thanks to you for watching. I'll see you next time around. Take care.